Okay, today is the 26th of July. Now we come to Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta number 19. Dve da vitaka sutta, two kinds of thought. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. There he addressed the monks thus, "Monks, Venerable Sir," they replied. The Blessed One said, "Monks, before my enlightenment, while I was still only an unenlightened bodhisattva, it occurred to me, suppose that I divide my thoughts into two classes. Then I set on one side thoughts of sensual desire, thoughts of ill will, and thoughts of cruelty. And I set on the other side thoughts of renunciation, thoughts of non-ill will, and thoughts of non-cruelty." I stop here for a moment. These, the Noble Eightfold Path, the second factor is Samma Sankappa, right thoughts. And right thoughts consist of thoughts of renunciation or no sensual desire, thoughts of non-ill will and thoughts of non-cruelty. So wrong thoughts or unskillful thoughts are the opposite, thoughts of sensual desire, thoughts of ill will and thoughts of cruelty. As I abided thus diligent, ardent and resolute, a thought of sensual desire arose in me. I understood thus, this thought of sensual desire has arisen in me. This leads to my own affliction, to others' affliction, and to the affliction of both. It obstructs wisdom, causes difficulties, and leads away from Nibbana. When I considered this leads to my own affliction, it subsided in me. When I considered this leads to others' affliction, it subsided in me. When I considered this leads to the affliction of both, it subsided in me. When I considered this obstructs wisdom, causes difficulties, and leads away from Nibbana, it subsided in me. Whenever a thought of sensual desire arose in me, I abandoned it, removed it, did away with it. As I abided thus diligent, ardent and resolute, a thought of ill will arose in me. Similarly, when I considered this leads to my affliction, the affliction of others, etc., then it subsided. And similarly, a thought of cruelty arose in me. I understood thus, this thought of cruelty has arisen in me. This leads to my own affliction, to others' affliction, and to the affliction of both. It obstructs wisdom, causes difficulties, and leads away from Nibbana. When I considered thus, it subsided in me. Whenever a thought of cruelty arose in me, I abandoned it, removed it, did away with it. So, I'll stop here for a moment. So here, the way the Buddha did away with these wrong thoughts or unskillful thoughts is to consider that if you allow it to arise, then it leads to your own affliction, your own suffering, and also causes suffering to others and to both, and also it obstructs wisdom and leads away from Nibbana. So when he realized that it was wrong, it was unskillful thoughts, then it subsided, or he did away with it. Monks, whatever a monk frequently thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of his mind. If he frequently thinks and ponders upon thoughts of sensual desire, he has abandoned the thought of renunciation to cultivate the thought of sensual desire, and then his mind inclines to thoughts of sensual desire. If he frequently thinks and ponders upon thoughts of ill will, similarly thoughts of cruelty, he has abandoned the thought of non-cruelty to cultivate the thought of cruelty, and then his mind inclines to thoughts of cruelty. I stop here for a moment. This paragraph, this passage is extremely important. What we frequently think and ponder upon, that becomes the inclination of our mind, our habit pattern. So we create habit patterns in our mind. Nowadays, scientists talk about what do you call it? No, neuron pathways and all this. So long ago, 2,500 years ago, the Buddha already saw this, that if we continue thinking in a particular way, we form these habit patterns in our mind, and our mind always inclines in that direction. So it's very important that, as the Buddha here says, that if we are practicing the spiritual path, we know that these are unskillful thoughts. We must immediately nip it in the bud. Of course, for most worldly people, if thoughts of sensual desire arise, they like to think more about it, they dream and all these things. So it just strengthens the sensual desire, or ill will, or cruelty. So this is a very important passage, that what we frequently think and ponder upon, that becomes the inclination or habit pattern of our mind. So that's why it's very important to always constantly look into our mind. How are we thinking? Are we thinking skillful thoughts or unskillful thoughts? What kind of habit pattern are we creating in our mind? Okay, to continue. Just as in the last month of the rainy season, in the autumn, when the crops thicken, a cowherd would guard his cows by constantly tapping and poking them on this side and that with a stick to check and curb them. Why is that? Because he sees that he could be flogged, imprisoned, fined, or blamed if he let them stray into the crops. So too I saw in unwholesome states danger, degradation, and defilement, and in wholesome states the blessing of renunciation, the aspect of cleansing. As I abided thus, diligent, ardent, and resolute, a thought of renunciation arose in me. I understood thus, this thought of renunciation has arisen in me. This does not lead to my own affliction, or to others' affliction, or to the affliction of both. It aids wisdom, does not cause difficulties, and leads to Nibbana. If I think and ponder upon this thought even for a night, even for a day, even for a night and day, I see nothing to fear from it. But with excessive thinking and pondering, I might tire my body. And when the body is tired, the mind becomes disturbed. And when the mind is disturbed, it is far from concentration. So I steadied my mind internally, quieted it, brought it to singleness and concentrated it. Why is that? So that my mind should not be disturbed. As I abided thus diligent, ardent, and resolute, a thought of non-ill will arose in me. Similarly, a thought of non-cruelty. I understood thus, this thought of non-ill will or non-cruelty has arisen in me. This does not lead to my own affliction, or to others' affliction, or to the affliction of both. It aids wisdom, does not cause difficulties, and leads to Nibbana. If I think and ponder upon this thought even for a night, even for a day, even for a night and day, I see nothing to fear from it. But with excessive thinking and pondering, I might tire my body, and when the body is tired, the mind becomes disturbed. And when the mind is disturbed, it is far from concentration. So I steadied my mind internally, quieted it, brought it to singleness, and concentrated it. Why is that? So that my mind should not be disturbed. Monks, whatever a monk frequently thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of his mind. If he frequently thinks and ponders upon thoughts of renunciation, he has abandoned the thought of sensual desire to cultivate the thought of renunciation, and then his mind inclines to thoughts of renunciation. If he frequently thinks and ponders upon thoughts of non-ill will, similarly thoughts of non-cruelty, he has abandoned the thought of ill will and cruelty to cultivate the thought of non-ill will and non-cruelty. And then his mind inclines to thoughts of non-cruelty. I'll stop here for a moment. So this is in the converse. If we constantly think skillful thoughts, that becomes our habit pattern, and we frequently think in that direction. So it is a training of the mind that we need to cultivate. Just as in the last month of the hot season, when all the crops have been brought inside the villages, a cowherd would guard his cows while staying at the root of a tree or out in the open. since he needs only to be mindful that the cows are there. So too, there was need for me only to be mindful that those states were there. Tireless energy was aroused in me, and unremitting mindfulness was established. My body was tranquil and untroubled. My mind concentrated and unified. Now Buddha refers to, let me see. Quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, I entered upon and abided in the first jhana, which is accompanied by applied and sustained thought, with delight and pleasure born of seclusion. With the stilling of applied and sustained thought, I entered upon and abided in the second jhana, which has self-confidence and singleness of mind, without applied and sustained thought, with delight and pleasure born of concentration. With the fading away as well of delight, I abided in equanimity and mindful and fully aware, still feeling pleasure with the body. I entered upon and abided in the third jhana, on account of which Noble Ones announced, he has a pleasant abiding, who has equanimity and is mindful. With the abandoning of pleasure and pain, and with the previous disappearance of joy and grief, I entered upon and abided in the fourth jhana, which has neither pain nor pleasure, and utter purity of mindfulness and equanimity. When my concentrated mind was thus purified, bright, unblemished, rid of imperfection, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, I directed it to the knowledge of the recollection of past lives. I recollected my manifold past lives, that is, 1 birth, 2 births, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100,000 births, many aeons of world contraction, many aeons of world expansion, many aeons of world contraction and expansion. There I was so named, of such a clan, with such an appearance, such was my nutriment, such my experience of pleasure and pain. And passing away from there, I reappeared elsewhere, and there too I was so named, of such a clan, etc. And passing away from there, I reappeared here. Thus, with the aspects and particulars, I recollected my manifold past lives. This was the first true knowledge attained by me in the first watch of the night. Ignorance was banished, and true knowledge arose. Darkness was banished, and light arose, as happens in one who abides diligent, ardent, and resolute. When my concentrated mind was thus purified, bright, unblemished, rid of imperfection, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, I directed it to the knowledge of the passing away and reappearance of beings. With the divine eye, which is purified and surpasses the human, I saw beings passing away and reappearing, inferior and superior, fair and ugly, and I understood how beings pass on according to their actions. Thus, with the divine eye, which is purified and surpasses the human, I saw beings passing away and reappearing, inferior and superior, fair and ugly, fortunate and unfortunate, and I understood how beings pass on according to their actions. This was the second true knowledge attained by me in the second watch of the night. Ignorance was banished, and true knowledge arose. Darkness was banished, and light arose, as happens in one who abides diligent, ardent, and resolute. When my concentrated mind was thus purified, bright, unblemished, rid of imperfection, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, I directed it to the knowledge of the destruction of the taints or asavas. I directly knew as it actually is, this is suffering. I directly knew as it actually is, this is the origin of suffering. I directly knew as it actually is, this is cessation of suffering. I directly knew as it actually is, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. I directly knew as it actually is, these are taints. I directly knew as it actually is, this is the origin of taints. I directly knew as it actually is, this is the cessation of taints. I directly knew as it actually is, this is the way leading to the cessation of taints. When I knew and saw thus, my mind was liberated from the taint of sensual desire, from the taint of being, and from the taint of ignorance. When it was liberated, there came the knowledge it is liberated. I directly knew birth is destroyed, the holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more coming to any state of being. This was the third true knowledge attained by me in the third watch of the night. Ignorance was banished and true knowledge arose. Darkness was banished and light arose, as happens in one who abides diligent, ardent, and resolute. So here just a description of how the Buddha attained enlightenment on that night. To continue, suppose, monks, that in a wooded range there was a great low-lying marsh, near which a large herd of deer lived. Then a man appeared, desiring their ruin, harm, and bondage, and he closed off the safe and good path that led to their happiness, and he opened up a false path, and he put out a decoy, and set up a dummy, so that the large herd of deer might later come upon calamity, disaster, and loss. But another man came, desiring their good, welfare, and protection, and he reopened the safe and good path that led to their happiness, and he closed off the false path, and he removed the decoy and destroyed the dummy, so that the large herd of deer might later come to growth, increase, and fulfillment. Monks, I have given this simile in order to convey a meaning. This is the meaning. The great low-lying marsh is a term for sensual pleasures. The large herd of deer is a term for beings. The man desiring their ruin, harm, and bondage is a term for Mara, the evil one. The false path is a term for the wrong eightfold path, that is wrong view, wrong intention, or wrong thoughts, wrong speech, wrong action, wrong livelihood, wrong effort, wrong mindfulness, and wrong concentration. The decoy is a term for delight and lust. The dummy is a term for ignorance. The man desiring their good, welfare, and protection is a term for the Tathagata, Arahant, Sammasambuddha. The safe and good path that led to the happiness is a term for the Noble Eightfold Path. That is, right view, right thoughts, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So monks, the safe and good path that leads to happiness has been reopened by me. The wrong path has been closed off. The dummy destroyed, the decoy removed. What should be done for disciples out of compassion by a teacher who seeks their welfare and has compassion for them? That I have done for you, monks. There are these roots of trees, these empty huts. Meditate, monks. Do not delay, or else you will regret it later. This is our instruction to you. That is what the Blessed One said. The monks were satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. So this last part about the Mara trying to lead us the wrong path. Unfortunately, even nowadays, there are some monks, they teach the Dhamma, but unfortunately they teach the wrong Dhamma. So they are also like Mara, leading us the wrong way. Sometimes the easy way, sometimes the way that people like, because it's easier to practice. So we have to be extremely careful. So to follow the right way, our teacher is always the Buddha. And now that he has entered Nibbana, he says that we should always refer to his suttas, suttas like this. Going back to the earlier part, where what a monk frequently thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of his mind, the habit pattern. It brings to my mind several years ago, one of our Buddhist devotees told me that his auntie had a very nasty temperament, a very nasty temper, and a very unpleasant character, always angry and had a lot of hatred, even for her own relatives and all these things. So when she died at the old age, 2 days before she died, 2 long teeth came out, Dracula's teeth came out of her mouth. The children were shocked. And this man who told me, he also saw it himself. So they tried to close the mouth, but they could not hide the teeth. But 2 days later, when she passed away, the 2 teeth disappeared. Which just proves that 2 days before she died, she already turned into that type of ghost, that fierce type of ghost with the 2 teeth. So it's very simple. I mean, if you understand this sutta, you know why, because she has always been having that kind of character, so much hatred and anger and all that. So she has made herself into that kind of a being, even with the human body. So that's why it's very important that we cultivate skillful thoughts. There are a lot of things in this world that people don't understand. For example, like indulging in sensual pleasures, indulging in food and all that. We think is harmless, but actually in the suttas you find that people who indulge in all these things, they go to woeful places of rebirth. Why? Because it is base. This type of thoughts, this type of actions are base. Like animals or ghosts and all this. So we debase ourselves by this type of actions. Because we have certain tendencies. Just like the story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. There are two parts of us, the good part, the bad part, the animal part and the angelic part. So it's up to us which one we want to choose. If we are careless, we just allow ourselves to follow our base tendencies, then we make ourselves into this type of creature, just like this woman. So when we are reborn to a woeful plane, then only we know why. Just like in the suttas, the Buddha says, when a being goes into hell, then he will realize what actions he did that make him fall into hell. That time he realized it was a big mistake. Nobody taught him. Then those actions will bring him to hell, or even to the ghost realm. Okay, the next sutta, number 20, Vitaka Santana Sutta, the removal of distracting thoughts. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. There he addressed the monks thus, "Monks, Venerable Sir," they replied. The Blessed One said this, "Monks, when a monk is pursuing the higher mind, from time to time he should give attention to 5 signs. What are the 5? Here, monks, when a monk is giving attention to some sign, and owing to that sign there arise in him evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate, and with delusion, then he should give attention to some other sign connected with what is wholesome. When he gives attention to some other sign connected with what is wholesome, then any evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate, and with delusion are abandoned in him and subside. With the abandoning of them, his mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness and concentrated. Just as a skilled carpenter or his apprentice might knock out, remove and extract a coarse speck by means of a fine one, so too when a monk gives attention to some other sign connected with what is wholesome, his mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness and concentrated. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha says, when evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, hatred, and delusion arise, then we should pay attention to some other object connected with what is wholesome. For example, if you have sensual thoughts or sexual thoughts arise, then instead of paying attention to a sexual object or sensual object, then you pay attention to some other sign, for example, asubha, loathsomeness of the body, or impermanence of everything in the world. Or if you have thoughts of anger, hatred arise, then you pay attention to the opposite, metta, loving kindness. And if you have thoughts connected with delusion arise, that is hard to see, but if you happen to notice it, then you can contemplate on the Dhamma. That is, all these are connected with what is wholesome. Okay, to continue. If while he is giving attention to some other sign connected with what is wholesome, there still arise in him evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hatred, and with delusion, then he should examine the danger in those thoughts thus. These thoughts are unwholesome, they are reprehensible, they result in suffering. When he examines the danger in these thoughts, then any evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, hatred, and delusion are abandoned in him and subside. With the abandoning of them, his mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness and concentrated. Just as a man or a woman, young, youthful, and fond of ornaments, would be horrified, humiliated, and disgusted if the carcass of a snake or a dog or a human being were hung around his or her neck, so too, when the monk examines the danger in those thoughts, his mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness and concentrated. I'll stop here for a moment. So here, the second way of removing distracting thoughts, unskillful thoughts, is to think of the danger in those thoughts, how it can lead you to unwholesome, to woeful planes of rebirth. So when we realize the danger, then you quickly remove them. Okay, to continue. If while he is examining the danger in those thoughts, there still arise in him evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, hatred, and delusion, then he should try to forget those thoughts and should not give attention to them. When he tries to forget those thoughts and does not give attention to them, then any evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, hatred, and delusion are abandoned in him and subside. With the abandoning of them, his mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness and concentrated. Just as a man with good eyes who did not want to see forms that had come within range of sight would either shut his eyes or look away, so too when a monk tries to forget those thoughts and does not give attention to them, his mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness and concentrated. I stop here for a moment. So here, the third way is not to pay attention. If you try the first way, it doesn't work. The second way, it doesn't work. Then you try the third way, not to pay attention. These probably are all connected with, say, like when you are meditating. You are meditating and all these unwholesome states arise. Here the Buddha is trying to tell you what to do. Okay, the fourth one. If while he is trying to forget those thoughts and is not giving attention to them, there still arise in him evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, hatred, and delusion, then he should give attention to stilling the thought volition of those thoughts. When he gives attention to stilling the thought volition of those thoughts, then any evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, hatred, and delusion are abandoned in him and subside. With the abandoning of them, his mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness and concentrated. Just as a man walking fast might consider, why am I walking fast? What if I walk slowly? And he would walk slowly. Then he might consider, why am I walking slowly? What if I stand? And he would stand. Then he might consider, why am I standing? What if I sit? And he would sit. Then he might consider, why am I sitting? What if I lie down? And he would lie down. By doing so, he would substitute each grosser posture one that was subtler. He would substitute for each grosser posture one that was subtler. So too, when a monk gives attention to stilling the thought volition of those thoughts, his mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness and concentrated. Stop here for a moment. This here that I have translated as thought volition, it is vitakka sankhara. Vitakka is thought, and sankhara is volition. Generally, many places we come across this word, sankhara, and the meaning that is appropriate is actually volition, just like in the five khandhas. One of the five aggregates, body and mind, is sankhara, and there it is translated. It is volition, will. So in other places also, unfortunately, A lot of books translate like here, they call it thought formation. This word formation, recently I think Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation, the Samyutta Nikaya, he says volitional formation. So he goes back to volition again, but previously they always translate as formation. And to me, this word formation is one of those blur words, and they don't really understand what it is actually. So they try to use a word that encompasses many things. So they think this word formation can encompass many things, including volition. But here, what do you mean by stilling the thought volition? When we have a thought, there is a volition to continue that thought. For example, if you have a thought of sensual desire and you get excited, you want to continue thinking, or if you're very angry with somebody, then you keep thinking. So when you start to examine this volition behind that thinking, then it starts to slow down. Why am I continuing to think in this direction? So that's why the simile given here, just as a man walking fast might consider, why am I walking fast? What if I walk slowly? So here we try to see where the thought comes from. The thought comes is because we have the intention to continue thinking. So this thought volition or thought intention is actually to me the intention to think. And if we start examining it, then it will slow down. If we don't notice where the thought comes from, then we just continue thinking. Okay, to continue. If while he's giving attention to stilling the thought volition or intention of those thoughts, there still arise in him evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, hatred, and delusion. Then with his teeth clenched and his tongue pressed against the roof of his mouth, he should beat down, constrain, and crush mind with mind. When with his teeth clenched and his tongue pressed against the roof of his mouth, he beats down, constrains, and crushes mind with mind, then any evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, hatred, and delusion are abandoned in him and subside. With the abandoning of them, his mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness, and concentrated. Just as a strong man might seize a weaker man by the head or shoulders and beat him down, constrain him, and crush him, so too, when with his teeth clenched and his tongue pressed against the roof of his mouth, a monk beats down, constrains, and crushes mind with mind. His mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness, and concentrated. Stop here for a moment. So this last one is using the strength of his mind to crush those unwholesome thoughts. But you're not going to be able to do that with the scattered mind. So you can only do that if your mind is strong enough. You're able to focus it. Monks, when a monk is giving attention to some sign, and owing to that sign there arise in him evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, hatred, and delusion, then when he gives attention to some other sign connected with what is wholesome, any such evil, unwholesome thoughts are abandoned in him and subside, and with the abandoning of them his mind becomes steady, internally quieted, brought to singleness, and concentrated. When he examines the danger in those thoughts, when he tries to forget those thoughts and does not give attention to them, when he gives attention to stilling the thought, volition, or intention of those thoughts, when with his teeth clenched and his tongue pressed against the roof of his mouth, he beats down, constrains, and crushes mind with mind, any such evil, unwholesome thoughts are abandoned in him, and his mind becomes steady internally, quieted, brought to singleness, and concentrated. This monk is then called a master of the causes of thought. He will think whatever thought he wishes to think, and he will not think any thought that he does not wish to think. He has severed craving, flung off the fetters, and with the complete penetration of conceit, he has made an end of suffering. That is what the Blessed One said. The monks were satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. That's the end of the sutta. So this sutta is giving us some this way of dealing with unwholesome thoughts that arise, especially during meditation. So the first one is to give attention to some other sign which is wholesome, instead of giving attention to the sign that is unwholesome. For example, the Buddha says, when we notice the beauty of some being, then lustful thoughts arise. So instead of observing or noticing the beauty, we notice the opposite, asubha, the unattractiveness of the body, for example, or the impermanence, how that body very soon will grow old and ugly. Or when hatred arises, then we give attention to metta. Then the second one is to realize the danger in those thoughts. When you know the danger in those thoughts, then you will be able to get rid of it. But then also you have to know the Dhamma quite well to realize the danger in them. The third way is to try to forget the thoughts and not pay attention to them. The fourth is to observe the thought volition or the thought intention and slow down the thoughts. And the fifth is to use the strength of mind to just beat down your mind and quieten it. Okay, now we come to the 21st Sutta, Kaka Chupama Sutta, the simile of the saw. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. Now, on that occasion, the Venerable Molia Paguna was associating overmuch with nuns. Nuns here refers to bhikkhunis. During the Buddha's time, they had bhikkhunis. He was associating so much with nuns that if any monk spoke dispraise of those nuns in his presence, he would become angry and displeased and would rebuke him. And if any monk spoke dispraise of the Venerable Molia Paguna in those nuns' presence, they would become angry and displeased and would rebuke him. So much was the Venerable Molia Paguna associating with nuns. Stop here for a moment. So this Molia Paguna was too friendly with the nuns, and they liked him so much that if anybody spoke ill of him, they would get angry. And he also liked them so much that anybody criticized the nuns, he would get angry. Then a certain monk went to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, sat down at one side and told the Blessed One what was taking place. Then the Blessed One addressed a certain monk thus, "Come, monk, tell the monk Molia Paguna in my name that the teacher calls him." "Yes, Venerable Sir," he replied. And he went to the Venerable Molia Paguna and told him, "The teacher calls you, friend Paguna." "Yes, friend," he replied, and he went to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, sat down at one side. The Blessed One asked him, "Paguna, is it true that you are associating overmuch with nuns? That you are associating so much with nuns that if any monk speaks dispraise of those nuns in your presence, you become angry and displeased and rebuke him? And if any monk speaks dispraise of you in those nuns' presence, they become angry and displeased and rebuke him. Are you associating so much with nuns as it seems?" "Yes, Venerable Sir." "Paguna, are you not a clansman who has gone forth out of faith from the home life into homelessness?" "Yes, Venerable Sir." "Paguna, it is not proper for you, a clansman gone forth out of faith from the home life into homelessness, to associate overmuch with nuns. Therefore, if anyone speaks dispraise of those nuns in your presence, you should abandon any desires and any thoughts based on the household life. And herein you should train thus: my mind will be unaffected, and I shall utter no evil words. I shall abide compassionate for his welfare, with a mind of loving kindness, without inner hate. That is how you should train, Paguna." I stop here for a moment. So here you notice the Buddha says, you should abandon any desires and any thoughts based on the household life. In other words, don't act like a lay person. When we are a layman, we act in a worldly way. But when we put on the robe and train in the spiritual path, then we cultivate higher thoughts, higher actions, etc. So the Buddha says, no matter what they say, you should always have loving kindness, practice loving kindness. Don't get angry, don't go back to your layman days. And the Buddha continued, if anyone gives those nuns a blow with his hand, with a cloth, with a stick, or with a knife in your presence, you should abandon any desires and any thoughts based on the household life. And herein you should train thus, my mind will be unaffected. If anyone speaks dispraise in your presence, you should abandon any desires and any thoughts based on the household life. And herein you should train thus, my mind will be unaffected. And I shall utter no evil words. I shall abide compassionate for his welfare, with a mind of loving kindness, without inner hate. If anyone should give you a blow with his hand, with a cloth, with a stick, or with a knife, you should abandon any desires and any thoughts based on the household life. And herein you should train thus, my mind will be unaffected, and I shall utter no evil words. I shall abide compassionate for his welfare, with a mind of loving kindness, without inner hate. That is how you should train Paguna. This is the Buddha standard, very hard to practice. Then the Blessed One addressed the monks thus, monks, there was an occasion when the monks satisfied my mind. Here I address the monks thus, monks, I eat at a single session. By so doing, I am free from illness and affliction, and I enjoy health, strength, and a comfortable abiding. Come, monks, eat at a single session. By so doing, you will be free from illness and affliction, and you will enjoy health, strength, and a comfortable abiding. And I had no need to keep on instructing those monks. I had only to arouse mindfulness in them. Suppose there were a chariot on even ground at the crossroads, harnessed to thoroughbreds, waiting with a goat lying ready, so that a skilled trainer, a charioteer of horses to be tamed, might mount it, and taking the reins in his left hand and the goad in his right hand, might drive out and back by any road whenever he likes. So too I had no need to keep on instructing those monks. I had only to arouse mindfulness in them. Let's stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha says that he eats in one sitting, and he is encouraging the monks to eat in one sitting. And the Buddha says that his monks are like thoroughbreds, just giving them a brief instruction and they will follow it, just like thoroughbred horses. Therefore, monks, abandon what is unwholesome and devote yourselves to wholesome states, for that is how you will come to growth, increase, and fulfillment in this Dhamma Vinaya. Suppose there were a big sala tree grove near a village or town, and it was choked with castor oil weeds, and some man would appear desiring its good welfare and protection. He would cut down and throw out the crooked saplings that robbed the sap, and he would clean up the interior of the grove and tend the straight, well-formed saplings, so that the sala tree grove later on would come to growth, increase, and fulfillment. So too, monks, abandon what is unwholesome and devote yourselves to wholesome states, for that is how you will come to growth, increase, and fulfillment in this Dhamma Vinaya. Let's stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha gives a simile where this big sala tree is choked with weeds and creepers and all that, and somebody comes along and cuts out all these weeds and creepers that are choking this tree, and then this tree grows up beautifully. So in the same way, we have our weeds and our creepers choking us, namely our bad habits, our unwholesome habits, thoughts, actions, and speech. So we have to constantly look at our three karmas, the body action, the speech, and the mind, and get rid of these unwholesome states, because these unwholesome states are choking us. Formerly monks, in this same Savatthi, there was a housewife named Vedehika, and a good report about Mistress Vedehika had spread thus. Mistress Vedehika is kind. Mistress Vedehika is gentle. Mistress Vedehika is peaceful. Now Mistress Vedehika had a maid named Kali, who was clever, nimble, and neat in her work. The maid Kali thought, a good report about my lady has spread thus. Mistress Vedehika is kind. Mistress Vedehika is gentle, peaceful. How is it now? While she does not show anger, is it nevertheless actually present in her, or is it absent? Or else is it just because my work is neat that my lady shows no anger, though it is actually present in her? Suppose I test my lady. So the maid Kali got up late. The Mistress Vedehika said, Hey Kali, what is it, madam? What is the matter with you that you get up so late? Nothing is the matter, madam. Nothing is the matter, you wicked girl, yet you get up so late. And she was angry and displeased, and she scowled. Then the maid Kali thought, the fact is that while my lady does not show anger, it is actually present in her, not absent, and it is just because my work is neat that my lady shows no anger, though it is actually present in her, not absent. Suppose I test my lady a little more. So the maid Kali got up later in the day. Then Mistress Vedehika said, Hey Kali, what is it, madam? What is the matter that you get up later in the day? Nothing is the matter, madam. Nothing is the matter, you wicked girl, yet you get up later in the day. And she was angry and displeased, and she spoke words of displeasure. Then the maid Kali thought, the fact is that while my lady does not show anger, it is actually present in her, not absent. Suppose I test my lady a little more. So the maid Kali got up still later in the day. Then Mistress Vedehika said, Hey Kali, what is it, madam? What is the matter that you get up still later in the day? Nothing is the matter, madam. Nothing is the matter, you wicked girl, yet you get up still later in the day. And she was angry and displeased, and she took a rolling pin, gave her a blow on the head, and cut her head. Then the maid Kali, with blood running from her cut head, denounced her mistress to the neighbors. See, ladies, the kind ladies' work. See, ladies, the gentle ladies' work. See, ladies, the peaceful ladies' work. How can she become angry and displeased with her only maid for getting up late? How can she take a rolling pin, give her a blow on the head, and cut her head? Then later on, a bad report about Mistress Vedehika spread thus. Mistress Vedehika is rough. Mistress Vedehika is violent. Mistress Vedehika is merciless. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha gives a simile of is a bit comical. This maid testing the mistress, and the end got a blow on the head. So too monks, some monk is extremely kind, extremely gentle, extremely peaceful, so long as disagreeable causes of speech do not touch him. But it is when disagreeable causes of speech touch him that it can be understood whether that monk is really kind, gentle, and peaceful. I do not call a monk easy to admonish, who is easy to admonish and makes himself easy to admonish, only for the sake of getting robes, alms, food, a resting place, and medicinal requisites. Why is that? Because that monk is not easy to admonish, nor makes himself easy to admonish, when he gets no robes, alms, food, or resting place, and medicinal requisites. But when a monk is easy to admonish and makes himself easy to admonish because he honors, respects, and reveres the Dhamma, him I call easy to admonish. Therefore, monks, you should train thus. We shall be easy to admonish and make ourselves easy to admonish because we honor, respect, and revere the Dhamma. That is how you should train monks. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is saying there are some monks, they come into monkhood because they want to get a lot of robes and good food and nice place to stay and medical requisites. But when they don't get it, then their true colors will show. So the Buddha says, if a monk respects and trains according to the Dhamma Vinaya, then he is easy to teach, easy to admonish. Monks, there are these 5 courses of speech that others may use when they address you. Their speech may be timely or untimely, true or untrue, gentle or harsh, connected with good or with harm, spoken with a mind of loving kindness or with inner hatred. When others address you, their speech may be timely or untimely. When others address you, their speech may be true or untrue. When others address you, their speech may be gentle or harsh. When others address you, their speech may be connected with good or with harm. When others address you, their speech may be spoken with a mind of loving kindness or with inner hatred. Herein, monks, you should train thus. Our minds will remain unaffected, and we shall utter no evil words. We shall abide compassionate for their welfare, with a mind of loving kindness, without inner hatred. We shall abide pervading that person with a mind imbued with loving kindness, and starting with him, we shall abide pervading the all-encompassing world with a mind imbued with loving kindness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. That is how we should train monks. Stop here for a moment. So here, 5 courses of speech. The Buddha says, good speech should have these 5 characteristics. It must be spoken timely, at the right time. For example, you want to advise somebody, don't give him advice when he's angry. So it should be timely. Second one, it must be factual. What you say must be true. Number 3, what you say should be gentle, spoken gently, not loudly, harshly. Number 4, with the mind of benefiting that person, with the intention of what you say should be beneficial, not unbeneficial. And then number 5, spoken with the mind of loving kindness. So when we speak, we have a mind of loving kindness. That is another feature of good speech. So these are the 5 characteristics. So when somebody addresses us, it might not be good speech. Then the Buddha says we should remain unaffected and don't get angry. Have metta, loving kindness, and compassion. No matter what people say. Monks, suppose a man came with a hoe and a basket and said, I shall make this great earth to be without earth. He would dig here and there, strew the soil here and there, spit here and there, and urinate here and there, saying, be without earth, be without earth. What do you think, monks? Could that man make this great earth to be without earth? No, Venerable Sir. Why is that? Because this great earth is deep and immense. It cannot possibly be made to be without earth. Eventually, the man would reap only weariness and disappointment. So too, monks, there are these 5 courses of speech when others address you. So here the Buddha repeats what he said previously. Herein, monks, you should train thus. Our minds will remain unaffected, and starting with him, we shall abide pervading the all-encompassing world with a mind similar to the earth, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, and without hostility and without ill will. That is how you should train monks. Monks, suppose a man came with crimson, turmeric, indigo, or carmine, and said, I shall draw pictures and make pictures appear on empty space. What do you think, monks? Could that man draw pictures and make pictures appear on empty space? No, Venerable Sir. Why is that? Because empty space is formless and invisible. He cannot possibly draw pictures there or make pictures appear there. Eventually, the man would reap only weariness and disappointment. So too, monks, there are these 5 courses of speech when others address you, and the Buddha repeats what he said previously. Herein, monks, you should train thus. Our minds will remain unaffected, and starting with him, we shall abide pervading the all-encompassing world with a mind similar to empty space, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. That is how we should train monks. Monks, suppose a man came with a blazing grass torch and said, I shall heat up and burn away the river Ganges with this blazing grass torch. What do you think, monks? Could that man heat up and burn away the river Ganges with that blazing grass torch? No, Venerable Sir. Why is that? Because the river Ganges is deep and immense. It cannot possibly be heated up and burned away with a blazing grass torch. Eventually, the man will reap only weariness and disappointment. So too, monks, there are these 5 courses of speech when others address you. And here the Buddha repeats again. Herein, monks, you should train thus. Our minds will remain unaffected, and starting with him, we shall abide pervading the all-encompassing world with a mind similar to the river Ganges, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. That is how you should train monks. Monks, suppose there were a cat's skin bag that was rubbed, well rubbed, thoroughly well rubbed, soft, silky, rid of rustling, rid of crackling, and a man came with a stick or a potsherd and said, there is this cat skin bag that is rubbed, thoroughly rubbed, well rubbed, rid of rustling, rid of crackling. I shall make it rustle and crackle. What do you think, monks? Could that man make it rustle or crackle with the stick or the potsherd? No, Venerable Sir. Why is that? Because that cat skin bag being rubbed, rid of rustling, rid of crackling, cannot possibly be made to rustle or crackle with the stick or the potsherd. Eventually, the man would reap only weariness and disappointment. So too, monks, there are these 5 courses of speech when others address you. The speech may be timely or untimely, true or untrue, gentle or harsh, connected with good or with harm, spoken with a mind of loving kindness or with inner hate. Herein, monks, you should train thus. Our minds will remain unaffected, and we shall utter no evil words. We shall abide compassionate for their welfare, with a mind of loving kindness, without inner hate. We shall abide pervading that person with a mind imbued with loving kindness. And starting with him, we shall abide pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind similar to a cat's skin bag, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. That is how we should train monks. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha has given many similes to tell us that if we practice loving kindness and compassion, and our loving kindness and compassion is abundant, exalted, immeasurable, then nobody can affect us with unpleasant words, etc. Monks, even if bandits were to sever you savagely limb by limb with a 2-handled saw, he who gave rise to a mind of hatred towards them would not be carrying out my teaching. Herein, monks, you should train thus. Our minds will remain unaffected, and we shall utter no evil words, and we shall abide compassionate for their welfare, with a mind of loving kindness, without inner hatred. We shall abide pervading them with a mind imbued with loving kindness, and starting with them, we shall abide pervading the all-encompassing world with a mind imbued with loving kindness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. That is how you should train monks. Monks, if you keep this advice on the simile of the saw constantly in mind, do you see any cause of speech, trivial or gross, that you could not endure? No, Venerable Sir. Therefore, monks, you should keep this advice on the simile of the saw constantly in mind. That will lead to your welfare and happiness for a long time. That is what the Blessed One said. The monks were satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. That's the end of the sutta. So this last simile that the Buddha has given is that even if you were to be caught by bandits and they saw off your limbs one by one with a 2-handled saw, if you got angry, then the Buddha says you are not carrying out his teaching, you are not practicing his teachings. And the Buddha says that our minds will remain unaffected. We shall abide compassionate for their welfare, and also abide pervading them with loving kindness, and abide pervading the all-encompassing world with loving kindness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable. Now this one you notice that the Buddha is saying that we should practice this loving kindness until it becomes abundant, exalted, and immeasurable. If you look at other suttas, you will realize that the Buddha's way of practicing loving kindness and compassion is first to attain the jhana. After you attain the jhana, then only you radiate this loving kindness so that it goes and pervades immeasurable abundance. So, unless you have that strength of mind to do this, it is not possible to practice this advice of the Buddha. You are sawed up and you don't get angry. You can only do that if the mind is so strong that the mind cannot move, right? If the mind cannot move, then it's so peaceful. Nobody can move your mind. You see, like remember many years ago in Vietnam, during the No Dinh Diem regime, a Buddhist monk burned himself in front of everybody, poured petrol on himself and burned himself. If his mind was not strong, how can he stay sitting while the fire is burning his body, right? His body, his mind is so strong that he's unmoved, all the pain, unmoved. So these things you cannot do with a weak mind. But nowadays, what is taught by meditation monks on loving kindness is, may I be well and happy, may all beings be well and happy. So this is not the Buddha's way of teaching, but it's a simpler way of teaching. So a lot of people, because they cannot practice the Buddha's way, they like this way. So you just imagine you have loving kindness, imagine you have compassion and all that. So maybe it's a first step, primary school or kindergarten, but nothing near the Buddha standard. The Buddha standard here, even if you were sawed up also, your mind is unmoving. So a lot of the Buddha's teachings, you cannot practice it with a weak mind. Impossible. You got to make your mind so strong. Otherwise, you cannot practice the Buddha's teachings at all. Stop here.
Sunday, can we go back to Sutta 19? I think 1, 2, the Buddha says that instead of when we have sensual thoughts, we should focus on the other thoughts of renunciation, thoughts of non-duty, thoughts of non-cruelty. So I was wondering whether these thoughts of renunciation, is it thoughts of abandonment, letting go?
No. When the Buddha here says thoughts of renunciation, it means renunciation of sensual desire. Okay. No sensual desire.
Then on this sutta and the simile of the saw, the Buddha says practicing metta, boundless metta, cultivating in such a way that whatever others say or others do don't affect us. But like I was thinking, like in a practical manner, for example, if you live in a community, if we have a toxic character amongst us, we are all not arahant, it will affect the community. So if we are to remove this person or ask this person to go, how does it?
It's okay if somebody is causing is a nuisance to others and obstructing others' practice. It's all right to remove him, because I remember reading somewhere, I'm not sure whether it's a Vinaya book or Sutta, there was a monk who was annoying everybody else, and the Buddha said, eject him, throw him out of the monastery. Why should we allow him to annoy everybody else? So the Buddha's, although the Buddha talks about this loving kindness and compassion and all that, the Buddha always, is always guided by wisdom. Always guided by wisdom. Buddha's compassion is always compassion with wisdom, not not without wisdom.
This one from Bante, in the simile of the sword, is he referring to the Arya? To be able to withstand the kind of pain, to have the control of mind, is he referring to the Arya?
You can say that what the Buddha is teaching us is the ultimate that is the ideal but of course very few people can practice it You notice, for example, when we compare it with the Jesus teaching, that Jesus said, if somebody slaps you on the right cheek, you offer him the left cheek, right? That's easier to do than being sawed up and not get angry, isn't it? So the Buddha standard is much higher. That is the ideal. It's just like precepts. Precepts are training. It's quite impossible for most of us to keep the precepts 100%, right? So what we can do, we do and over the years, slowly we progress, and then we improve, right? So we have this ideal in mind, but we may not be able to do it. Never mind. The Buddha says that the spiritual path is a gradual training. So just like a baby learning how to walk, the baby falls down. Never mind, get up again and try. Fall down, never mind, get up. Fall down how many times or so, never mind. As long as there is that willingness to get up again and try. That is important.
Pastor, I've got one question. Usually we meditate, then we need to pay attention. We need to pay attention to our thoughts, or not to pay attention to our thoughts. Then in order to improve our meditation, my question is this.
The Buddha's meditation is to pay attention to your object of meditation. For example, your breath. You only pay attention to your breath, nothing else. But if you are unable to do that, and a lot of thoughts arise, and then you apply this, what the sutta says, right?
Pastor, I want but to pay attention is to get rid of the unwholesome thoughts. But if let's say we do not pay attention, is another method.
Yeah.
So for us beginners, Master, what is the best method to actually get rid of this unwholesome thoughts?
Just to continue meditating, and if you find, for example, you are meditating on the breath, it's very difficult, then you change your object. I mentioned the other day that if you find the breath meditation too difficult for you, then you can just chant Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya. It's simpler.
Thank you, Master.
Earlier on you were talking about the metta, the developing metta. And normally, as a layperson, the way I've been taught anyway, is may I be well, may I be happy, may I be on religion and whatnot, yeah? And then you send the metta to all other beings, relative or friends and all others. Besides that, what other better ways is there to develop the metta?
The one taught by the Buddha, I mentioned just now, is to first to get jhana. After you get jhana, then only you can radiate out. And that is really radiating out, so that other beings can feel it. So what is taught nowadays is to imagine that you radiate metta, but you don't actually radiate.
But you see, even though we don't radiate the metta, but we feel good. Because then it helps in our dealings with our friends or with our loved ones. Then we get angry, but when you thought about it, hey, hang on a minute. then you start thinking of the loving kindness. As a lay person, I mean, as a beginner, I find it helps. You see?
Yeah, I'm not saying it does not work at all. What I said, it is kindergarten level. Huh?
Similar to the thoughts when we think the mixing of metta as through our speech, it is like conditioning our mind to think of good feelings and promoting good thoughts. So that I think conditioning ourselves, not meditation.
It is not really meditation, but because if you think of thoughts of loving kindness, then you remind yourself to practice loving kindness. And the way actually to practice loving kindness is to practice loving kindness through your body language and through your speech and through your mind. So when you talk to people, you try to speak in a kinder way instead of shouting. And also in your body action, when you talk to somebody, you pat him on the back, hug him or something like that. Then people know that you have some, you have some loving kindness, right? So these are indirect ways of practicing loving kindness. Not the way the Buddha taught, but it still works a bit.
I would like to relate my experience in the metta meditation. At one time I had a lousy supplier from business, so I decided to terminate him. Then one morning I did my metta meditation. Then after that it softened my heart, so I decided to engage him further. But then he doesn't improve, then finally I still have to terminate him. So it seems like it doesn't really work.
No response. No response.
So Monday, so we don't not say to practice metta meditation.
No. Practice whatever works for you It works for you.
But it doesn't work. So why not say radiate, but it doesn't go.
In this case, he's directing it to a human being. He cannot read your thoughts, But if you direct it to spirits, they can read your thoughts, when I first came into Buddhism, and I read about this loving kindness and compassion and all that, so I started to practice, I became a vegetarian now, and I became a vegetarian for 10 years, and then I tried to practice loving kindness, So I remember one day I went with my sifu, At that time I learned a bit of Kung Fu, So my sifu went to the jungle to collect herbs. So I went with him, and I thought there are a lot of unseen beings around, so I radiated thoughts of loving kindness to them. That night I had an extremely good sleep. Such a sweet sleep. When I got up in the morning, I was feeling so good. So I thought maybe those spirits are also giving me metta. Those unseen beings, what we think, they can read our mind. So like you go into the jungle, you go to lonely places and all that, you think good thoughts about them. The Buddha says that everywhere we go, we should think thoughts of loving kindness towards all beings, and we won't be harmed. Because the spirits can read our thoughts.
I don't know, just recently, it was yesterday.
I think the mic.
Just to, I was so tired the night before because I couldn't sleep. My gastric was playing up. So I basically slept maybe about a couple of hours at the most. So in the afternoon I was lying upstairs for about 20 minutes. So tired. just couldn't. So I went upstairs. But as I do that not long, I feel as if somebody just about throw me up from the chair. Then I just wake up. What sign is that? I was wondering, why do I feel as if someone is throwing me up from the chair?
There are spirits everywhere, right? But in a monastery, there are spirits that protect the monastery, and so like devas, you come here and you wear the robe and you're a bit lazy, they
That's what I was wondering, is it punishing?
yeah, sometimes some people stay in the kuti, and they also get this type of treatment. So you so you have to be more careful. In fact, this is one of the reasons why monks like to go to lonely, secluded places to practice. Because when you go to those places, there are a lot of unseen beings around, and you dare not become lazy. If you are lazy, something will shake you up.
I think when we share our merit to the other beings, say, quite far away, so I think they also, they receive it, they know it, because they have the psychic power.
Yeah. Okay. Shall we end here?